Buddhadhamma, November 29th, 2025. Chapter 6, Appendix 1, page 630. Sa-upādisesa and Anupādisesa. Appendix number 1, 610. Some scholars interpret the passage in the Anupāda-parinibbāna Nikaya, which classifies enlightened beings into two kinds. The first kind is sa-upādisesa-nibbānadhātu, stream enterers, once returners and non-returners who are still subject to the grasping and defilements. And the other classification is Anupādisesa-nibbānadhātu. These are arahants who are freed from grasping and defilements. By translating upati and upatana, grasping, thus define the two kinds of nibbāna this way. The first one is sa-upādisesa-nibbānadhātu, nibbāna with grasping remaining, or nibbāna of those with latent defilements, nibbāna of the stream enterers and once returners and non-returners. The seconds are Anupādisesa-nibbānadhātu, nibbāna with no grasping remaining, or nibbāna of those freed from grasping. This is nibbāna for the arahants. Translating this way springs from the confusion between the states of bhava and sa-upādisesa-nibbāna and anupādisesa-nibbāna and persons bukkala. The two kinds of nibbāna describes the relationship between nibbāna and awakened beings. The two persons describes the attributes of those in contact with nibbāna. To avoid confusion, these two pairs should be clearly distinguished. The distinguishing word in this case is upati, which has a different meaning when referring to either nibbāna or to enlightened beings. However, some of the commentarial passages reinforce this misunderstanding that sa-upādisesa-nibbāna and nibbāna of the sa-upādisesa-bukkala. A clear development of the meaning of these two terms, stressing an activity or an event, is established in the term kilesaparinibbāna and khandhaparinibbāna. The former corresponds to sa-upādisesa-nibbāna, while the latter corresponds to anupādisesa-nibbāna. Despite the frequent use of these terms in this way, the commentators and the sub-commentators were well aware of the meaning of sa-upādisesa-nibbāna as denoting the quality of state, as can be seen by these examples. So the sotapanna, the anagami, and so forth, so the stream enterer and the non-returner and the once returner are one of the classifications, with still desire, longing, and grasping, and defilements of their mental states. The other type is the arahants, the enlightened being, without the defilements of grasping and longing. The example, Gautama Buddha abided in the nibbāna element with remainder, conducting his life for the benefit of all beings, faring well in this world until he attained nibbāna element without remainder. This is from the Visuddhamma, Tutiyo Bhago, Panna, Bhumite Seva Varana, Avijja Pachaya Sankhara, Pavitara Katha Vanana. That's one of the examples from the Visuddhimagga, with the Nibbāna element without the remainder of the grasping and the defilements of mental impurity. With the fruit of arahantship, the arahants are completely dispassionate, abiding in Nibbāna element, and the remainder wise, diligent, all day and night. With the end of their final mind, they attain Nibbāna state without remainder in their final passing. Appendix 2, Diṭṭhadhammika and Samparāyika. As noun forms, Diṭṭhadhammika and Samparāyika exist, Diṭṭhadhamma and Samparāyika respectively. These four words are used extensively both in the Diṭṭhadhammika, the Pali Canon, and in the commentaries, and generally have the meaning of the present or this life. On the other hand, and future, next life, the next world, or the other. The compounds with atta, Diṭṭhadhammika kata, means present welfare, and Samparāyika means future welfare, or especially familiar. Later in the commentaries, one occasionally finds paramatta, supreme welfare, included to form a triad. In the original Diṭṭhadhammika, however, one only finds a pair of Diṭṭhadhammika kata and Samparāyika kata. In this context, Samparāyika refers to the welfare that surpasses or transcends that of Diṭṭhadhammika and includes the definition of paramatta. Paramatta was originally used on its own as a synonym for Nibbāna. In later contexts, the definition sa-upādisesa-nibbānadhātu was narrowed to mean future welfare, the next world of the heavenly, which was the welfare below the supreme, that is, not yet of Nibbāna. An example of Samparāyika being used in the original context in the story of the old Brahmin, Brahmayu, who visited Gautama Buddha. Then the Brahmin, Brahmayu, thought, permission has been granted to me by the recluse Gautama. What should I ask him about? Good in this life or the supreme good? Then he thought, I am skilled in the good of this life, and others too ask me about the good in this life. Why shouldn't I ask him only about the supreme good? Then he addressed Gautama, the Blessed One, in the stanza. How does one become a Brahmin? And how does one attain to knowledge? How has one the triple knowledge? And how does one become a holy scholar? How does one become an arahant? And how does one attain completeness? How is one a silent sage? And how can one be called an awakened Buddha? In the original sense, Samparāyika too encompasses the meanings of paramatta, as seen in the Kanakatara Sutra, where the king Pasanani asked Gautama Buddha about the distinction between members of the four castes. The Buddha, Gautama, replied that concerning the present life, nobles and Brahmins are held to the superiors since people pay homage to them. But concerning a person's spiritual attainments, castes play no role. Here only the quality of the person's effort is important. As the deliverance, Gautama Buddha claimed there is no difference between that achieved by members of various social classes. Similarity in the Mahānidesa, one who sees two benefits, mundane and transcendent, from personal beliefs, which is the mundane or the conscious benefits stemming from belief. Here, whatever is the doctrine of the teacher, the disciple shares the doctrine. They honor, respect, worship, and hold in all the teachers of this doctrine. And as the consequence, they receive robes, alms food, lodging, and medicines, their four requisites. What is the transcendent benefit stemming from belief? Those disciples wish for the future. May this doctrine lead to birth as a Naga, a Garuda, as Indra, Brahma, or as a god. This doctrine is sufficient for purity and deliverance. This view leads to purity and deliverance. The commentators tend to restrict the definition Dhamma or Diṭṭhadhammika, referring to this existence in life, and Samparāyika, referring to the next life or world. Some commentators on the two elements of Nibbāna use the same restricted definitions. Diṭṭhadhammika, meaning in this life, and Samparāyika, meaning in the future or after death. Appendix number 3, 6, 12, final mind. Charima sita, charimaka sita, charama vinana, and charamimaka vinana all mean the same thing. That is, the last mind, the final consciousness, or more explicitly, the last mind in existence. It refers to the passing away, kuti, of an arahant's mind. Also, parinibbāna. It is the mind of the arahant at death, or the mind at the moment of final passing. The term charima vinana is the first used in the Kuranidesa, a secondary text of the Tipitaka. For example, at final passing of an arahant, attaining Nibbāna element without remainder, due to the cessation of final consciousness, right here, wisdom and mindfulness, materiality, mentality also ceases. They are still made tranquil and no longer established. In the commentaries, the term charamya vinana and charamina sita are frequently used. They sometimes associate charamina sita with the attainment of Nibbāna element without remainder. Equally, they associate the attainment of the initial abiding in sa-upādisesa-nibbāna with the fruit of arahantship. Note that in many Thai editions, charamita sita and charamana vinana are printed as purima sita and purima vinana, preceding mind consciousness. Examples of such inconsistency include canonical texts that use purima and explanatory commentaries that use charima, or the passage in one volume uses one term and the identical passage in another volume using the other. The evidence, however, confirms that the correct term is charima. Appendix number 4, 613, Attaining Nibbāna. I have occasionally used the expression attaining Nibbāna because it is familiar and easy to understand. Although the term that is more accurate or specific to the context is sa-upādisesa. Its verb form is sa-upādisesa. Later texts sometimes use sa-upādisesa, which literally means realization. The commentaries explains it as to experience or to see clearly for oneself. Although attaining Nibbāna may be more convenient, realizing Nibbāna probably has less risk of misunderstanding. Attainment is closer to Pali word adhigamma or adhigacchati, and pati, past principle used for Nibbāna, pata. Both of these words are frequently used with Nibbāna, but in a secondary context and usually in verses. The following words used with Nibbāna are scattered throughout the scriptures, and they are mainly used in the verse aratehi, attain, accomplished, busati, reach, touch, gacchati, arrive, lapati, obtain. And finally, the last appendix, appendix number 5, chapter 6:14, Anupāda-parinibbāna, states that Anupāda-parinibbāna equals Paccaya-parinibbāna, complete unconditioned Nibbāna. In the Majjhima Nikaya Diṭṭha states that Apaccaya-parinibbāna equals Anupādisesa-nibbāna. It follows, therefore, that Anupādisesa-nibbāna is identical to both Anupāda-parinibbāna and Paccaya-parinibbāna, identical to the essential nature of Nibbāna, as discussed earlier in this chapter. It substitutes the term Anupāda-parinibbāna for Anupādisesa-nibbāna. Anupāda-parinibbāna is an important term denoting Nibbāna. It always stands on its own. It's often used to express the goal of Buddhism. Bhikkhu, the Dhamma is taught for me for the sake of final Nibbāna without few. It is for the final Nibbāna without few that the holy life is lived under the Blessed One. The commentaries generally define Anupāda-parinibbāna as Paccaya-parinibbāna, the unconditioned, not conditioned by and few, which can be realized in this very life. Some teachers claim that Anupāda-parinibbāna translate a final Nibbāna without clinging, upadana, referring to the fruit of arahantship, but both the commentators reject the opinion. Furthermore, the Vimutti Magga, composed by Upadesa before Buddhaghosa composed the Visuddhamika, explains Nissarana Vimutti as Anupādisesa-parinibbāna. Interestingly, this opinion forms the meaning to express above. See the following discussions on deliverance. That is the end of chapter 6. It is great to note that in the commentaries from Sutra Central on Nibbāna and Parinibbāna, the sutras distinguish two elements, right? We just discussed sa-upādisesa-nibbānadhātu and Nibbāna element without residue. So there was two of them, one with residue and one with residue. What are the residues? The residues are the craving and the longing for it, for mental impurity. So the former is, one of them is the extinction of lust, hatred, and delusion attained by the arahant while alive. The other is the remainderless cessation, nirodha, of all conditioned existence that occur when arahant's death, so at the death of the arahant. Now, in the commentaries, the two elements of Nibbāna are respectively called kilesaparinibbāna, the quenching of defilements at the attainment of arahantship, or khandhaparinibbāna, the quenching of the continuum of the skandha, the 5 aggregates, with the arahant's demise. Do the commentaries treat the two Nibbāna elements and the two kinds of parinibbāna as interchangeable and synonyms? In suttas uses, it may be preferable to see two kinds of parinibbāna as events, which give access to the two corresponding Nibbāna elements. So parinibbāna then is the act of quenching. Nibbāna is the state of quenchness. So one is the verb and one is the noun. Now, to explain the term is not a set of question of interpretation. What actually is to be made of a very explanation of Nibbāna given in the Nikayas has been subject to debate since the early days. The ground was divided between those who regarded it as mere extinction of defilements, of asavas, the rid of the extinction of asavas and kilesas, and the cessation of existence, nirodha, for those who understand it as a transcendental lokutaraya reality. Some of the sutras explain Nibbāna as the destruction of lust, the destruction of hatred, the destruction of delusion, which emphasizes a psychological dimension. Elsewhere, it is called the unconditioned, which seems to place stress on ontological transcendence. The Theravada commentators regarded Nibbāna as unconditioned element. It maintained this debate on Nibbāna recorded in the Visuddhimagga, written by Buddhaghosa, page 507 and 509. I just wanted to read a little bit of discussion from sutracentral.net on those two distinctions of parinibbāna and Nibbāna.